Tarek stared at the singularity gate like it was a half-baked casserole, and he was the unlucky guest who'd drawn the short straw. The thing shimmered like an interstellar disco ball, casting ominous shadows over the barren, blasted landscape of Kelthora. The gate hung in the air, all glowy and mysterious, like the universe's least welcome surprise party. It was supposed to bridge dimensions or some such nonsense, but Tarek had a more fitting word for it: trouble. Fancy piece of junk, isn't it? Juno quipped, brushing space dust off her diplomatic robes. She had this uncanny ability to look composed and sarcastic in equal measure, like an ancient goddess of snarkery. Junk's generous, Tarek replied, scratching the stubble on his chin. More like death wrapped in a light show. Cheer up, sunshine, Juno said, scanning the readouts on her wrist console. Maybe it's just a portal to a lovely, peaceful dimension where nothing ever goes wrong. Yeah, and maybe I'm the Emperor of Mars, Tarek snorted. He was the lead engineer on this god-forsaken rock, a position that made him about as comfortable as a claustrophobic in an airlock. Last time I checked, though, we never get to go anywhere nice. They walked towards the gate, each step kicking up more of the grayish dust that covered everything on Kelthora, like the universe had gotten sick of the planet's crap and decided to bury it alive. The gate loomed larger, humming with potential energy, like a cat ready to pounce, or maybe a predator ready to devour. You think it's stable? Juno asked, although they both knew the answer was somewhere between hell no and not even if pigs fly. It's as stable as our funding, Tarek muttered, eyes glued to the fluctuating energy readings. Numbers danced like a drunken congaline on his wrist pad. So about as stable as a toddler on a sugar high, Juno remarked dryly. Exactly, Tarek fiddled with one of the sensors, probably to look busy rather than helpful. The thing beeped in protest. This gate's the kind of problem that keeps you up at night, not that we get much sleep around here anyway. Oh, I sleep fine, Juno said, shielding her eyes against the unnatural glow. Worrying's your department. My favorite hobby, Tarek grunted, kneeling to adjust another piece of equipment. The wind whipped around them, eager to find its way into every crevice. You're good at diplomacy, Juno. Any chance you can talk this thing down? Juno laughed, the sound dry and brittle like leaves in winter. Sure, I'll just ask the interdimensional monstrosity to kindly take a rain check on devouring our universe. Maybe offer it a cup of tea and a biscuit while you're at it, Tarek suggested, standing up and gazing at the readout again. The data looked like it was having a seizure. Only if it prefers Earl Grey, Juno continued with a smirk. The gate pulsed suddenly, as if acknowledging their presence or mocking their helplessness. Tarek and Juno exchanged a glance, the kind of glance that asked, "What the hell do we do now?" but didn't really expect an answer. You know, Tarek said, gesturing at the gate, I bet whoever built this thing never thought they'd get humans showing up and poking it with sticks. We're resourceful like that, Juno replied. Curiosity might kill the cat, but it hasn't done us in just yet. For a moment they just stood there, two tiny figures dwarfed by the enormity of the gate and the potential disaster it represented. The kind of scene you'd see in a painting right before everything goes to hell, which seemed about right for their lives lately. A voice crackled over the comms, dragging them back from their thoughts. Hey Tarek, you gonna stare at it all day or actually do something? It was Dax, head of operations and a master of timing. Great, just what we need, Tarek muttered to Juno before answering. What do you suggest, Dax? Sacrifice a goat to appease the omnipotent gods of cosmic screw-ups. If you've got a goat, I'm all ears, Dax shot back. Otherwise, maybe see if you can get any solid data before it decides to eat us. Solid data. Right, Tarek said. Might as well ask me to turn water into wine while I'm at it. Juno clapped him on the back. Keep dreaming, miracle worker, Tarek sighed. All right, we'll try another scan. Who knows, maybe today's the day the universe doesn't hate us. Optimism? Juno asked, eyebrows raised. More like desperate hope, Tarek replied, setting the scanner to another sequence. But I hear that's practically the same thing. There was a beat of silence, the kind that stretches out when you're waiting for something bad to happen, or maybe something good, but mostly bad because this was Kelthora and hope had a way of dying out here. The gate flickered and the ground trembled slightly beneath their feet. Tarek's wristpad chirped, the screen lighting up with a wave of red. That can't be good, Juno said, looking over his shoulder. Oh, it's definitely not, Tarek confirmed. Energy spikes off the charts. You ever think maybe we should have taken up fishing instead? Juno asked. Something less likely to turn us into dust? Yeah, but where's the fun in that? Tarek shot back, grinning despite himself. The danger was real, tangible, but somehow joking made it bearable, at least until the universe decided to squish them like bugs. With a determined set to his jaw, Tarek adjusted his equipment, fingers moving with the precision of a man who knew exactly how close they were to disaster, close enough to taste it. All right, he said, let's see if we can't convince this thing we're not worth the trouble. Good luck, Juno said. I'll be over here practicing my negotiations with the cosmic void. They worked in tandem, a practiced dance of tech and tension. The gate loomed, indifferent to their efforts, an ever-present reminder that the universe was a chaotic, unpredictable mess. And it was only a matter of time before they found out just how chaotic it could get. Terk and Juno trudged towards the council chamber, a monolithic structure that looked like it had been designed by an architect who'd just discovered concrete and despair. The place was buzzing with the kind of energy you only get when disaster's on the horizon and nobody's quite sure whose fault it is yet. Bet you 10 credits it turns into a shouting match, Juno said, adjusting her diplomatic robes, which were now more gray than regal, thanks to the relentless Kelthoran dust. Terk snorted, wiping a smudge from his forehead. You kidding, it'll be a bloody circus. All we need is a ringmaster. They paused outside the entrance, a pair of guards giving them the kind of once-over reserved for people who bring bad news. Terk could almost hear them thinking, oh great, these two again. Inside, the chamber was a cacophony of raised voices and clattering metal chairs. The council members were a mixed bag of bureaucrats, scientists, and the odd military official who apparently thought shouting louder made them more correct. Councillor Rin, a gaunt man with a voice like a rusty hinge, smacked a fist on the table. We can't keep ignoring the risks. That gate's a powder keg, and we're standing around with a blowtorch. Brilliant imagery, Juno muttered to Terk, who was busy pretending to be fascinated with a crack in the floor. Rin's got a point, though, Terk replied under his breath. One wrong move and we're all cosmic dust. Councillor Merk, who seemed to have been born in a suit, leaned forward, his expression as dry as Kelthora itself. And how do you propose we handle it? Shut it down and lose our only chance at understanding it? Ah, the age-old debate, curiosity versus staying alive. Juno raised a hand, cutting through the noise with her practiced ease. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted grumps, she began, her voice layered with sarcasm and authority. We need a decision, but preferably one that doesn't involve us being atomized. That's the spirit, Terk whispered, barely hiding his grin. Juno continued, Terk and I ran the latest diagnostics. The energy spikes are off the charts. If this thing goes sideways, we're talking a big bang, but not the fun kind. Rin looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. So what? We just roll over and let it happen. Rin, if you want to storm the gate with a stick and a prayer, be my guest, Terk said. But until then, maybe we should focus on not getting exploded. Merk nodded, though his face suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. We need a plan, a real plan. Not just wishful thinking. Juno tapped her wrist console, bringing up a swirling mess of data that made the council members squint. This is the current status. We need to stabilize it long enough to gather more information, or at least long enough to ensure it doesn't rip us a new one. How do we stabilize something we barely understand? Merk asked, skepticism dripping from his words. Carefully, Terk replied with a shrug. We can reinforce the containment field, adjust the output, maybe even tweak the dimensional anchors. Merk raised an eyebrow. Dimensional anchors. Yeah, I know, sounds made up, Terk admitted. But it's what we got. Unless you've got a magic wand hidden somewhere, it's our best shot. Rin shook his head. I still say we're playing with fire. Then maybe we should stop dousing ourselves in gasoline, Juno shot back. The room fell silent, the weight of their predicament sinking in like an anchor in a stormy sea. Terk could practically taste the tension, and it wasn't pleasant. Merk finally spoke, his voice measured. All right, we reinforce the containment field, gather more data, and the lights flickered. A low rumble reverberated through the chamber, like the planet itself was grumbling about their indecision. What now? Terk muttered, glancing at Juno, who was checking her wrist console with a frown. Another spike, she announced, her tone grim. Bigger than before. Well, that's just great, Rin grumbled. Are we sure this thing isn't just a cosmic prank? Juno sighed, a sound that carried the weight of too many late nights and too much caffeine. Cosmic prank or not, it's on us to deal with it. Merk raised his hands, calling for calm. We need volunteers, people who know what they're doing. Terk raised an eyebrow. You volunteering, Merk? The counselor grimaced, looking like he'd rather eat a bowl of nails. I'll leave that to the experts. Any takers? The room was silent, the kind of silence that's heavy with the knowledge that volunteering might just be a death sentence. But hey, someone had to do it. Guess that's us then, Juno said, casting a sidelong glance at Terk. Always did like living on the edge. Yeah, well, Terk said, rubbing the back of his neck. Let's just hope it doesn't become a cliff. With the council's shaky approval, Terk and Juno left the chamber, a sense of foreboding dogging their steps. Kelthora's gray landscape stretched out before them, a desolate reminder of everything that could go wrong. They made their way back to the gate, the air around it shimmering with unseen energy. The thing pulsed ominously, as if it knew they were coming and was relishing the chance to mess with them. So, Terk, Juno began, her tone casual despite the gravity of their task. What's the plan? Survive, preferably, he replied, tapping away at his wristpad. Seriously, though, we reinforce the field. If we can stabilize the energy output, we might just avoid becoming a footnote in the annals of cosmic accidents. Optimistic, Juno said, her voice laced with irony. I thought you were the skeptical one. I can be skeptical and hopeful, Terk replied. They're not mutually exclusive. It's like hoping for a miracle while preparing for a disaster. Juno chuckled, a sound that was more sardonic than amused. You know, if we pull this off, drinks are on me. Looking forward to it, Terk said, adjusting the energy conduits with a deft touch that spoke of too many hours spent coaxing stubborn machines into obedience. The ground hummed beneath their feet, a reminder of the power they were trying to harness, or at least keep from exploding in their faces. Okay, Terk said, taking a deep breath. Here goes nothing, or everything, Juno added, crossing her fingers for luck. They worked quickly, an unspoken understanding guiding their movements. Terk adjusted the containment field, Juno monitored the energy output, and the gate loomed over them, a silent witness to their efforts. Minutes stretched into hours, the air thick with the acrid scent of electricity and tension. Terk's fingers moved like a blur over his wrist pad, adjusting, recalibrating, hoping against hope that it would be enough. Field's holding, Juno said, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. I think we're actually doing it. Don't jinx it, Terk warned, though he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd pull this off. The gate pulsed again, a slow, steady rhythm that seemed to match their racing hearts. Terk glanced at Juno, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared resolve. I think we've got it, he said, the words barely above a whisper. I think the ground shuddered violently, cutting him off. Alarms blared, their shrill cries echoing across the barren landscape. What the hell? Juno shouted, clutching at a nearby console to steady herself. Terk's wristpad went haywire, the numbers a chaotic jumble that made no sense. I don't know, but it's not us. As if on cue, the sky above them darkened, clouds swirling ominously. The wind picked up, howling like a banshee, and a sense of dread settled over them. I think, Terk said slowly, we might have angered it. Fantastic, Juno replied dryly. Just what we needed, a pissed-off interdimensional gate. The ground trembled again and Terk's mind raced. They needed a new plan fast before things went from bad to worse. All right, he said, determination hardening his voice. Let's shut it down. We can't stabilize it, so we cut the power. Juno nodded, her face set in grim determination. Agreed. Let's hope we're not too late. They worked in tandem, fingers flying over controls, desperation lending speed to their movements. The gate seemed to resist, its energy flaring like a living thing fighting for survival. Come on, Terk muttered, eyes locked on the readouts. Work with us here. The ground shook once more, a violent convulsion that sent them sprawling. Terk's wristpad slipped from his grasp, skidding across the rocky ground. Juno cursed, scrambling to her feet as the wind whipped around them. We're running out of time. Tell me something I don't know, Terk shouted back, retrieving his wristpad with a quick, desperate lunge. They resumed their efforts, each second feeling like an eternity. The world around them was a chaotic symphony of noise and movement, and through it all the gate loomed, its presence an oppressive weight. Finally, mercifully, the energy readings began to drop. The gate's glow dimmed slightly and the tremors subsided. We did it, Juno breathed, her voice tinged with awe and disbelief. For now, Terk cautioned, though relief flooded through him. They'd bought themselves some time, but the threat was far from over. As they stood there, panting and covered in dust, the sky began to clear. The wind died down, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Well, Juno said, brushing herself off, that was fun. Terk barked a laugh, the sound more incredulous than amused. Yeah, a real blast. They made their way back to the council chamber, the weight of their near disaster hanging heavy on their shoulders. The council would need to be informed, plans revised, and precautions doubled. But for now, at least they'd survived, which on Kelthora was about as close to victory as you could get. As they walked, Terk glanced at Juno, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Think the council will throw us a parade? Juno snorted, a sound that was both derisive and oddly affectionate. I'll settle for a stiff drink. Sounds good to me, Terk agreed, the prospect of a drink far more appealing than any accolade. They continued onwards, two figures in a landscape of gray and dust, their steps steady despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. The gate remained a threat, but they were ready. Or at least as ready as anyone could be when dealing with cosmic chaos. And really, what more could you ask for on a planet like Kelthora? The council chamber was alive with a chorus of controlled chaos as Terk and Juno walked back in, both resembling war-torn heroes without the luxury of a triumphant soundtrack. The usual suspects were there, Rin looking more like a haunted scarecrow than ever, Merrick trying to make himself invisible behind a pile of reports, and the general hum of panicked conversations that passed for normal these days. You two look like you wrestled a singularity and lost, Merrick commented as they approached. Good to see you've mastered the art of the obvious, Merrick, Juno replied, patting the dust off her robes with all the grace of a cat caught in the rain. Rin leaned forward, his face etched with concern sharper than his cheekbones. Did you manage to stabilize it? For the time being, Terk responded, hands shoved deep into his pockets. But it's like putting a band-aid on a black hole. We need a more permanent solution or a stronger adhesive. Just as Rin opened his mouth to speak, probably to suggest more meetings that would solve exactly nothing, a low rumble swept through the chamber. Not the porridge-like grumble of planetary discontent they were used to, but something more ominous, like the universe clearing its throat before delivering very bad news. "What now?" Merrick muttered, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Through the windows, they could see Kelthora's skies shifting like a bad mood. Clouds coalesced, swirling in colors that defied the usual palette of gray and more gray. Then they saw it, an armada of ships emerging from the chaos, sleek and alien, cutting through the atmosphere with an elegance that was almost insulting. "Well, shit," Juno said, echoing the sentiment of the room with the kind of eloquence that diplomacy books never taught. The ships landed with a disturbing lack of ceremony, kicking up waves of dust that settled over everything like a second skin. From one of the ships emerged a procession of figures, tall, thin, and shimmering like mirages, Zyxarians. A race as enigmatic as they were irritatingly philosophical, known for their divine claims and ability to make every conversation feel like a philosophical debate with a drunk. Terk sighed. As if a temperamental gate wasn't enough, now we have the galactic equivalent of door-to-door evangelists, Juno smirked. I hope they've brought pamphlets. The Zyxarians approached, their movements fluid and unnervingly synchronized. The lead figure, taller than the rest, wore an expression that combined serenity with a hint of smug superiority, like a monk who'd just out-meditated everyone else in the room. "Greetings, inhabitants of Kelthora," the Zyxarian leader intoned, his voice carrying an unsettling resonance that seemed to vibrate through bone. "We are the Zyxarian emissaries, here to enlighten and guide you through the cosmic trials you face." Terk exchanged a glance with Juno. "Cosmic trials, sounds like they've been reading our mail." Rin stepped forward, his skepticism a tangible force. "Enlighten us, will you?" "Last I checked, we're not hosting a spiritual retreat. Your singularity gate is an affront to cosmic balance," the Zyxarian said, with the kind of patience reserved for dealing with particularly slow children. "We offer you the chance to align with the divine harmony of the universe." "Thanks, but we prefer our chaos," Terk quipped. "Keeps things interesting." The Zyxarian ignored him, continuing with the zeal of someone who truly believed they could save the souls of an entire planet over a long weekend. "Our presence will ensure that the gate is stabilized. However, you must surrender control to us." Juno arched an eyebrow. "And what do we get in return?" "A cosmic pat on the back." The Zyxarian smiled, an expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Peace, prosperity, and alignment with the galactic concord. Sounds like a lot of words for do as we say," Merrick muttered, shifting uncomfortably. Rin, ever the cautious diplomat, tried a different tack. "And if we refuse your generous offer?" The Zyxarian's smile widened, though the temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. "Then we cannot guarantee your safety." "The singularity is a volatile entity." "Yeah," Terk said. "Well, life's a volatile entity. We still manage." The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of debate, voices rising and falling like an operatic rendition of a disaster movie. The Zyxarians watched, impassive, as the humans argued amongst themselves. It was a tapestry of chaos that even Kelthora's dust couldn't cover. Amidst the uproar, Juno leaned in close to Terk, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is bad. Tell me about it," Terk replied, keeping his gaze on the Zyxarians. "They've got us by the proverbial short hairs. We can't let them take control, but we can't just ignore them either." "Then we play the game," Juno said, a determined glint in her eyes. "Stall them, negotiate, do whatever it takes to keep the peace long enough for us to figure out a better solution." Terk nodded, a plan beginning to form in the back of his mind. "All right, let's give them the diplomatic runaround. Keep them talking while we work on a plan B." Breaking from their huddle, Terk raised his voice over the din. "All right, everyone, let's not descend into anarchy just yet. How about we sit down with our Zyxarian friends here and discuss this like civilized beings? Do you even know how to be civilized?" Juno teased, a wry smile playing on her lips. "I can fake it," Terk replied, matching her grin. The council slowly came to order, with Rin taking the lead in extending an olive branch to the Zyxarians, or at least offering them the illusion of one. As the humans and Zyxarians settled into negotiations, Terk and Juno made their way back to the gate, their steps quickened by the urgency of the situation. "You think this is gonna work?" Juno asked as they neared the gate's ominous silhouette. "Depends," Terk said, studying the gate with a critical eye, "on whether they're more interested in keeping the peace or playing God." Juno laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Given our luck, I'd bet on the latter." The gate buzzed with energy, a perpetual reminder of the ticking time bomb they were sitting on. Terk's mind raced, sifting through possibilities, half-formed plans, and desperate gambits. They needed to find a way to stabilize the singularity without handing the keys to the kingdom over to the Zyxarians. As they worked, the air was thick with tension and the acrid scent of overworked machinery. Minutes bled into hours, the sun sinking below the horizon and casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Still, they labored on, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't just an option, it was an endgame. Finally, as exhaustion threatened to overtake them, there was a glimmer of hope. Tarek's wristpad beeped, showing a steady line across the readouts. "I think we might have something," he said, a hint of triumph in his voice. Juno peered over his shoulder, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the data. "It's not perfect, but it's a start." They both knew it was a temporary fix, a patch on a leaking dam, but it was a step in the right direction. And in the grim calculus of their current predicament, any progress was something to hold on to. As they prepared to present their findings to the council, the Zyxarians' looming threat hung over them like a storm cloud, stubbornly refusing to move on. The aliens offered the promise of stability, but at the cost of independence, a price too steep for some and a necessary evil for others. "Think we can convince them to give us more time?" Juno asked as they walked back to the chamber. "Not sure," Tarek admitted, "but we have to try. It's either that or let the Zyxarians take control. And I don't know about you, but I didn't survive this long just to become some alien's pet project." As they re-entered the council chamber, the discussions with the Zyxarians were still underway, the air thick with tension and the unspoken threat of what was at stake. The room filled with the hum of anticipation as Tarek and Juno approached the circle of delegates. "Got something to share?" Rin asked as they joined the table. "Yeah," Tarek said, "we've got a temporary stabilization plan. It's not perfect, but it might buy us the time we need to figure out a more permanent solution." The Zyxarian leader turned their way, an inscrutable expression on his face. "And you believe this will prevent the singularity from collapsing long enough for us to come up with something better," Juno said, folding her arms. "Assuming, of course, you're willing to help rather than just dictate terms." The Zyxarian leader considered this, a long silence stretching out as he weighed their options. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, we will assist you for the time being, but know this, you will not have unlimited patience from us." "Patience?" Merrick snorted. "We're just grateful you've got any to spare." With a temporary truce in place, the council resumed its work, the monumental task of balancing diplomacy with the ever-present threat of technological catastrophe looming large. Tarek and Juno exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the precarious path they were now treading. "Looks like we're in for a long haul," Tarek said, the weight of their situation settling over him like a familiar shroud. Juno nodded, her expression resolute. "Yeah, but at least we're not alone." For now, at least, they had bought themselves a reprieve. But the clock was still ticking, the gates hum a constant reminder that their battle was far from over. And somewhere within the council chamber, the shadow of the Zyxarians lurked, watching, waiting for their moment. Tarek and Juno knew they had to be ready. After all, on Kelthora, survival was a game of wits, courage, and relentless tenacity, and they intended to play until the very end. The Zyxarians hadn't wasted any time. They were masters of manipulation, half philosopher, half snake oil salesman. If you gave them an inch, they'd take a parsec. Within days, they had started converting human factions to their cause like a cosmic cult. Tarek found himself scrubbing his temples in frustration as he leaned against the doorway of the council chamber. "Is it just me, or is everyone suddenly going Zyxarian crazy? I swear they could sell sand to a desert." Juno, perched on the edge of a nearby table, shrugged. "People love a quick fix, especially if it promises peace and prosperity without the pesky effort part." "Remind me again why we're not jumping on that bandwagon," Tarek asked, half serious. "Because we've got this thing called a spine," Juno replied dryly, her wrist console pinging with notifications that she ignored with practiced indifference. And a healthy distrust of all things too good to be true. As if on cue, Counselor Merrick appeared, looking like he'd just escaped an avalanche of spreadsheets. "We've got a problem," he announced, his voice dripping with the kind of despair only a bureaucrat could muster. "A big one," Juno arched an eyebrow. "Bigger than the usual we're all gonna die problem." Merrick nodded, pulling out a report that was thicker than it had any right being. "The Zyxarians are convincing people that their tech can stabilize the gate once and for all. They're claiming it's divine intervention." "Divine my ass," Tarek muttered, peering over Merrick's shoulder. "Let me guess, and all we have to do is hand over control." "Like giving car keys to a toddler." "Pretty much," Merrick confirmed, his lips thin. "They've got quite a few of the council members eating out of their hands." Juno sighed. "Of course they do. It's easier to believe in saviors than to do the hard work yourself." Rin, looking more like a haunted scarecrow than ever, shuffled over with an expression that suggested he hadn't slept in days. "There's talk of a vote to let the Zyxarians assist with the gate." "Assist," Tarek scoffed. "More like commandeer." Rin nodded grimly. "If they win over enough factions, we might not have a choice." Juno tapped her console, her curiosity half-heartedly piqued. "And what's their selling point exactly?" "Eternal bliss and a free set of steak knives if you call now." "Pretty much," Rin said, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. They've promised vast technological advances, cures for diseases, unlimited resources, and of course stability for the gate. Promises they might actually keep, Merrick added, a note of caution in his voice. He looked at Tarek and Juno seriously. We need you two to keep the remaining factions together. We can't let this become a total loss. Tarek exchanged a look with Juno, a shared moment of here we go again. All right, he said reluctantly, but if we're doing this, we're doing it our way. Juno grinned. Yeah, diplomacy Tarek style. Nothing like a few well-aimed insults to keep everyone on their toes. With their marching orders set, Tarek and Juno left the council chamber, intent on rallying support. The corridors of the compound buzzed with activity, a hive of people moving with the intent of a sinking ship's crew. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them were bad. Think we'll manage to keep enough people on our side? Juno asked as they maneuvered through the bustling hallway. We better, Tarek said, pushing past a particularly stubborn door. Last thing we need is for the Zyxarians to turn Kelthora into their personal theme park. Welcome to Zyxaria World. Please leave your autonomy at the door, Juno chuckled. I dunno, the merchandising would be stellar. As they entered the main conference hall, they were met with a cacophony of voices, each one more impassioned than the last. Delegates, engineers, and military personnel, each group fervently discussing the Zyxarian offer like it was the latest political scandal. Tarek climbed onto a chair to get a better view, waving his arms like a conductor trying to tame an unruly orchestra. All right, listen up, he bellowed, bringing the room to a relative hush. Before we all start kneeling to our new alien overlords, maybe we should talk about what we're actually signing up for. A murmur ran through the crowd, skepticism mixed with the allure of technological salvation. Juno joined Tarek on his makeshift stage, her presence a grounding force amid the chaos. Look, I get it, Juno said, her voice cutting through the tension. We're all tired, frustrated, and facing a problem bigger than Merrick's ego. But trusting the Zyxarians to fix things for us, that's a gamble we can't afford. But what if they can actually help? Someone shouted from the back, a voice laced with desperation. Tarek pointed in the general direction of the voice. And what if they can't, or worse, what if they can, but only on their terms? You ready to bet your freedom on that? A silence settled over the room, uncertainty hanging heavy in the air. Tarek and Juno exchanged a glance, both aware that they were fighting an uphill battle against a tide of fear and false hope. The Zyxarians are tempting, sure, Juno continued, her tone firm. But remember, they are also strangers with their own agenda, and from where I stand, their agenda looks a lot like control. Rin shuffled forward, his expression weary but resolute. We have to stand together, he said, addressing the crowd. Divided, we're easy prey. But united, we might just stand a chance. The murmurs began to shift, the crowd starting to sway back towards a semblance of unity. It wasn't perfect, and doubt still lingered, but it was a start. And sometimes a start was all you needed. As the crowd began to disperse, Tarek and Juno stepped down from their impromptu podium, the weight of their task still pressing heavily on their shoulders. Think we did enough? Juno asked, her voice low. Enough to buy us some time, Tarek replied, slipping his hands into his pockets. But we're gonna need more than talk to win this. Juno nodded, her gaze steely with determination. Then we better come up with something fast. I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to hand over the keys to the Zyxarians. Agreed, Tarek said, his mind already racing with possibilities. They needed a plan, something that would tip the scales back in their favor. But for now, they'd settle for a temporary reprieve. The next few days were a blur of hasty meetings, clandestine conversations, and the kind of paranoia that only a potential alien takeover could inspire. The Zyxarians, ever the picture of alien serenity, continued their campaign with unnerving ease, their promises echoing through the corridors like the siren call of an interstellar Pied Piper. Tarek and Juno found themselves playing a game of intergalactic chess, each move met with a counter, every small victory overshadowed by the looming threat of the Zyxarian influence. The cracks in human unity were beginning to show, fault lines of doubt and desperation fracturing their fragile coalition. We need more than words, Tarek muttered, pacing the confines of their makeshift war room. Something tangible. Something that proves we don't need the Zyxarians to save us. Juno, perched on a table strewn with schematics and data readouts, nodded thoughtfully. Like an alternative solution for stabilizing the gate? Exactly, Tarek said, stopping mid-step. But we're gonna have to get creative. The Zyxarians have tech we haven't even dreamed of, which means, Juno said, tapping a finger against her chin, we need to think like them, beat them at their own game. Tarek grinned, a spark of mischief in his eyes. You thinking what I'm thinking? If it involves breaking a few rules and pissing off some aliens, then yeah. With renewed determination, they set to work, cobbling together a plan that was equal parts audacity and desperation. They would need to harness every scrap of ingenuity they had, push the boundaries of what was possible within their limited means. The first step was gathering intel straight from the source. Terk and Juno needed to get close to the Zyxarians, see their tech in action without tipping their hand. It was a risky move, one that could backfire spectacularly, but at this point, risk was the only currency they had. Under the guise of cooperative dialogue, they approached the Zyxarian emissary with a proposition. "We'd like a demonstration," Terk said, using his most diplomatic tone. "Show us what your technology can really do." The Zyxarian leader, tall and inscrutable as ever, considered the request with mild curiosity. "A demonstration? To what end? To better understand what you're offering," Juno interjected smoothly. "If we're going to work together, we need to see firsthand what's at stake." The emissary exchanged a look with his fellow delegates, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, we shall arrange for demonstration. But know this, our technology is sacred, not to be trifled with. We wouldn't dream of it," Terk said with a kind of smile that suggested he was already dreaming of it. And so, a tentative agreement was struck. The Zyxarians would showcase their technological prowess, and Terk and Juno would get their chance to see if they could turn the tables. As they prepared for the demonstration, Terk couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a razor's edge, caught between the promise of salvation and the threat of subjugation. But there was no turning back now. They'd set the pieces in motion, and all they could do was play the hand they'd been dealt. "Ready?" Juno asked, adjusting the settings on her wrist console. Terk nodded, a steely resolve settling over him. "Let's see what they've got." As the Zyxarians prepared to unveil their secrets, Terk and Juno steeled themselves for what lay ahead. The battle for Kelthura's future was far from over, and they were determined to fight until the bitter end, no matter the cost. Terk had a headache that felt like a small planet was trying to colonize his brain. The kind of hammering thud that made you question your life choices, like agreeing to speak at a flat Earth convention. He rubbed his temples and muttered to himself, "Just another day in paradise." Juno, ever the picture of calm skepticism, was tapping away at her wrist console. "You know, Terk, if the Zyxarians were any more smug, they'd float out of their own atmosphere." He grinned despite himself. "Yeah, they probably have gravity on standby just for dramatic exits." The council chamber was as lively as a funeral, which, given the circumstances, seemed fitting. A mix of dread and resignation hung over everyone like a bad smell. Merrick was on his usual perch, trying to blend into the background with his stack of reports as a makeshift invisibility cloak. Rin was leaning against the wall, looking like he'd seen several lifetimes of existential crises. "What's the latest disaster?" Terk asked, trying to sound more upbeat than he felt. "The Zyxarians are planning some kind of grand finale," Merrick said, his voice as dull as ever. "Something to do with the Singularity Gate." "Of course," Terk said, rolling his eyes. "Why settle for a simple invasion when you can throw a cosmic gala?" Juno snorted. "I'm sure it'll be the event of the millennium. Formal attire required, obedience optional." Rin, with his haunted scarecrow demeanor, shuffled over. "They claim the conversion ritual will stabilize the gate permanently. And what do we get in return?" Terk asked, knowing the answer would probably make that headache worse. "The chance to join their harmonious collective," Rin replied, his voice dripping with disdain. "As if we'd swap our chaos for their order." Terk closed his eyes, trying to block out the image of a Zyxarian theme park with humans as the main attraction. "So we're just supposed to lie down and let them roll over us?" "Not exactly," Rin said, a rare spark of defiance in his eyes. "I've been digging into their tech." "I think I found something." Juno perked up, her curiosity piqued. "Oh, do tell." "It's a small flaw," Rin admitted, "but it could be enough to disrupt their ritual." "Great," Terk said. "Now if only we could figure out how to use it before we're all assimilated." Juno gave him a sidelong glance. "You're not thinking of doing something reckless, are you?" "Me, reckless?" Terk feigned innocence. "Perish the thought. I just happen to have a penchant for last-minute heroics." "Well, your penchant better come with a plan," Juno retorted, her tone half amused, half exasperated. "Right," Terk said, nodding. "Let's see what we can cook up before the Zyxarians start passing out Kool-Aid." They broke away from the council chamber, leaving Merrick and Rin to their bureaucratic misery. The corridors were alive with the kind of frantic energy that only comes from impending doom. People darted to and fro, each more stressed than the last. "People really do love a quick fix," Juno mused as they navigated through the chaos. "It's easier to believe in saviors than to do the hard work yourself." "Yeah," Terk agreed. "Especially if your saviors come with kick-ass technology and a no-strings-attached sales pitch." They reached their makeshift war room, a cluttered space filled with maps, schematics, and the occasional half-eaten sandwich. Terk rubbed his hands together. "All right, let's figure out how to kick the Zyxarians in their collective behinds." Juno started sifting through the mess. "If Rin's right about this flaw, we might have a fighting chance. But we'll need to get close, and I mean really close. Close enough to smell their superiority complex," Terk quipped. "And we'll need to act fast," Juno added. "As in blink and you'll miss it fast." The plan they concocted was, in a word, audacious. It involved sneaking into the Zyxarian control center, exploiting the flaw Rin had discovered, and disrupting the ritual. Simple, right? It was a long shot, but long shots were their specialty. As they prepared, Terk couldn't help but think about the stakes. Kelthora's skies were already crowded with alien ships, each one a testament to just how thoroughly outmatched they were. But defeat wasn't in his vocabulary, not yet anyway. The Zyxarians, in their infinite arrogance, had agreed to the demonstration. It was their opportunity to flaunt their technological superiority, like a rich kid showing off a new toy. But for Terk and Juno, it was a chance to turn the tables. They arrived at the appointed time, greeted by a Zyxarian entourage that was all regal indifference and polite condescension. The control center was a marvel of alien engineering, with consoles that hummed with power and displays that made human tech look like cave drawings. The Zyxarian leader, whom Terk had nicknamed Smug McAlienface in his head, gestured to the central console. "Behold the culmination of our superior technology." "Impressive," Terk said, his voice laced with faux admiration. "You know, if this whole invasion thing doesn't work out, you could always open a theme park." Juno nudged him, a silent reminder to play nice. "We're eager to see what your technology can achieve." The demonstration began, a dazzling display of light and energy that made Terk's head spin. But amidst the spectacle, he focused on the flaw Rin had identified, an infinitesimal hiccup in the energy flow, a vulnerability that no amount of Zyxarian posturing could hide. Juno, ever the tech whiz, discreetly adjusted her wrist console, capturing the data they needed. "Got it," she whispered, her expression a mix of triumph and relief. Terk nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. They had what they needed, but now came the hard part, putting their plan into action without getting vaporized in the process. As the demonstration concluded, the Zyxarian leader turned to them, a smug smile playing on his lips. "I trust you now understand the futility of resistance." "Futility," Terk repeated, mulling over the word like a bad aftertaste. "Such a fun word, isn't it? But I think we'll stick to resisting, thanks." With the intel secured, Terk and Juno withdrew, their minds already spinning with the next steps. They needed to act quickly before the Zyxarians could realize they'd been duped. Back in their war room, Terk laid out the plan. "We hit them where it hurts, use their own tech against them." "And if it fails?" Juno asked, though the look in her eyes said she already knew the answer. "Then we go down swinging," Terk replied, his voice steady. "But at least we'll go down on our own terms." Juno nodded, a fierce determination in her gaze. "Let's give them hell then." The days that followed were a blur of preparation and anticipation. Terk and Juno worked tirelessly, coordinating with Rin and the few allies they had left. Every moment counted, every decision could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. As the Zyxarians prepared for their final conversion ritual, Terk couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The Singularity Gate loomed ominously, a symbol of everything they stood to lose. On the eve of the ritual, Terk gathered their ragtag team, a motley crew of skeptics, rebels, and the occasional optimist. "All right, folks," he said, addressing them with a grin that belied the gravity of the situation. "Tomorrow we crash the biggest party this side of the galaxy." A cheer went up, a sound more defiant than hopeful, but it was enough to bolster their spirits. "We've got one shot," Juno reminded them, her tone firm. "So let's make it count." Terk nodded, feeling the weight of their task settle over him like a second skin. "We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone who still believes in choosing their own path." As they dispersed, Terk found himself alone with Juno, the night stretching infinitely before them. "Think we've got a chance?" he asked, the question lingering between them like an unspoken promise. "We have to," she replied, her voice a quiet vow. "Because if we don't, who will?" With that, they steeled themselves for the battle to come. The odds were stacked against them, the enemy formidable, but Terk and Juno had something the Zyxarians lacked: hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to light the way. As dawn broke over Kelthora's desolate landscape, Terk took a deep breath, preparing for the fight of their lives. The Zyxarian ritual was set to commence, and they were ready to disrupt it in a blaze of glory. "Time to make some noise," Terk said, a grin spreading across his face. Juno matched his grin with one of her own. "Let's give him a show they'll never forget." And with that, they set off into the unknown, determined to rewrite their fate in the stars. The council chamber, a place more accustomed to slow deaths by bureaucracy than heroics, was as lively as awake. Terk, fighting to stave off yet another headache, leaned over to Juno, who was furiously tapping away on her wrist console. "Why do I feel like we're about to audition for the universe's least successful open mic night?" Terk muttered, his tone a perfect mix of sarcasm and resignation. Juno glanced up, a smirk playing at her lips. "If that's the case, let's at least give them a show worth remembering." Terk rubbed his temples, suddenly feeling every bit the reluctant leader he'd become. "Right, a show. With explosions, betrayal, and my personal favorite, an audience that could vaporize us on a whim. All we need now is a laugh track. As if on cue, Counselor Rin's rusty hinge of a voice cut through the room. Settle down, everyone. We're on the cusp of something monumental. The gathered crowd of bureaucrats, soldiers, and skeptics managed to look simultaneously terrified and skeptical, an impressive feat. Merrick, predictably, was clutching his report like a lifeline. Terk wondered if the man used it as a pillow at night. Juno cleared her throat, drawing the room's attention. I've been digging into the archives, she began, her voice steady, and I found something interesting. Something old. Terk raised an eyebrow. Old like Rin old, or old like potential savior of humanity older? Juno replied, her eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and dread. Ancient human texts. Apparently it turns out we have a unique trait that might just save our asses. The room leaned in, curiosity piqued despite the gloom hanging over them. Rin looked like he might actually crack a smile, a prospect that was equal parts uplifting and terrifying. Get to the point, Terk said. We don't have all day, and I'm sure the Zyxarians have already sent their invitations for the conversion party. Juno nodded, scrolling through her console. Empathy, she declared, letting the word hang in the air. Empathy? Terk echoed, the skepticism dripping from his voice. You're saying we're going to hug them into submission? Not quite, Juno shot back, unruffled. These texts suggest that empathy allows us to disrupt psychic fields, and since the Zyxarians rely heavily on psychic energy for their ritual, the realization dawned, spreading through the room like wildfire. Even Merrick seemed to perk up, flipping through his report with renewed vigor. Terk chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. So let me get this straight. Our grand plan is to weaponize feelings. Exactly, Juno said, her resolve unyielding. For once, being overly emotional might actually work in our favor. Rin, always one for a dramatic pause, let the room stew in silence before speaking. Then we must rally our people. We need to harness this empathy and focus it against the Zyxarians. Terk couldn't help but snort. Fantastic. Next, we'll have group therapy sessions in the middle of the battlefield. Juno rolled her eyes, but there was a warmth to the expression. It's what makes us human, Terk. You of all people should appreciate the irony. He sighed, conceding the point. All right then, let's do this. If we're going down, we might as well make it interesting. The preparation that followed was chaotic, to say the least. Terk found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity, each task more improbable than the last. Soldiers were briefed on the peculiarities of using empathy as a weapon, while scientists scratched their heads over the logistics. If any of them doubted the plan, they kept it to themselves, perhaps because the alternative was too bleak to entertain. Terk and Juno, along with their ragtag crew, gathered in what had become their unofficial headquarters, a room filled with enough caffeine and desperation to fuel a small rebellion. Terk found himself pacing, a habit he'd picked up somewhere between impending doom and total annihilation. Who would have thought, he mused, that being touchy-feely would be our secret weapon? Juno, her focus never wavering, replied with a wry smile. You're just upset it means we can't blow something up for once. He shrugged, unrepentant. I'm a simple man with simple tastes. Fireworks, explosions, the occasional mutiny, all the classics. The door opened, admitting Rin and Merk, both looking as though they'd aged several years in a matter of days. Rin in particular had an air of grim determination about him, like a man ready to face his demons with nothing but a rusty sword. The people are ready, Rin announced, his voice a blend of gravel and resignation. We've managed to gather enough to form a resistance. Terk clapped his hands together, feigning enthusiasm. Great. Now all we need is a catchy slogan and some rousing speeches. Merk, not one for humor, cleared his throat. This is serious, Terk. We may not get another chance. Terk sobered, his expression slipping into something more earnest. I know, but if we're going to do this, I'd prefer we go down laughing. Juno nodded, her gaze steady. It's what separates us from them. Well, that and our complete lack of fashion sense. With everything in place, their plan, such as it was, hinged on one last gamble. The Zyxarians, in their arrogance, had assumed their superiority was absolute. It was time to prove them wrong. As the final preparations unfolded, Terk found himself alone with Juno, the two of them staring out at the bleak landscape of Kelthora. The skies were a swirling mass of alien ships, each one a reminder of the scale of their task. Think we'll pull this off? Terk asked, not really expecting an answer. Juno crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. And if all else fails, wing it. Terk laughed, a genuine sound amidst the chaos. Why didn't I think of that? Because you're too busy being the hero, Juno retorted, a teasing edge to her voice. Someone's got to keep you grounded. He nodded, grateful for her presence. Then let's make sure they remember us. As the ire drew near, the ragtag human resistance assembled under the shadow of the Singularity Gate. It loomed above them like a cosmic guillotine, ready to descend at the slightest misstep. All right, folks, Terk called out, his voice carrying over the crowd. Today we stand not just for ourselves, but for every stubborn, infuriating human who's ever refused to back down." A cheer went up, fierce and defiant. "We've got one shot," Juno reminded them, her voice clear. "So let's make sure it counts." With the rallying cry still echoing in their ears, they moved out, a disparate group united by a common purpose. Terk led the charge, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. As they approached the Zyxarian stronghold, the air was thick with tension. The alien ships hovered overhead, their silent threat a constant reminder of what was at stake. Terk, with Juno at his side, took a deep breath. "Ready, ready," she replied, her confidence unwavering. They pressed on, their path illuminated by the harsh glow of the Singularity Gate. The Zyxarians, for all their technological prowess, had underestimated the one thing humanity excelled at: defiance. The ritual was set to begin, the Zyxarian leaders already in place, their arrogance blinding them to the approaching storm. Terk and his team moved quietly, every step a testament to determination born of desperation. As they reached the ritual site, Terk felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a shroud. This was it, their one chance to turn the tide. Juno nodded a silent signal, and he stepped forward, raising his voice to cut through the chaos. "Hey, smug McAlienface, you forgot to invite us to your grand finale." The Zyxarian leader turned, a sneer twisting his features. "You presume to interrupt our ritual with your primitive antics." Terk grinned, unflinching. "That's the thing about humans, we love a good party crash." With those words, the resistance surged forward, empathy-focused and determined. The air crackled with energy, a testament to the sheer force of will that fueled their defiance. For a moment, it felt as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Then, with a cry that echoed across the barren landscape, the humans unleashed their secret weapon. Empathy, harnessed and focused, surged forth, a wave of raw emotion crashing over the Zyxarians. It struck like a physical force, disrupting the psychic networks that powered their ritual. The Zyxarians staggered, their once unflappable facade cracking under the onslaught. Confusion flickered across their features as their carefully laid plans unraveled before their eyes. Terk pressed forward, the thrill of unexpected success coursing through his veins. "I'll give you this," he called out, his voice carrying over the din. "You really know how to throw a party. But you forgot the golden rule: never underestimate the locals." Amidst the chaos, Juno worked furiously, her wrist console a blur as she exploited every weakness, every flaw in the Zyxarian defenses. "We've got them on the ropes," she shouted, her voice a beacon of hope amidst the turmoil. As the ragtag band of human misfits surged forward, Terk felt an odd sense of camaraderie amidst the madness. Just another day of saving the universe from snake oil salesmen in space. No pressure. The Zyxarians, oblivious to the impending storm of human tenacity, began their ritual with all the grace of a bureaucratic committee meeting. Chants in a language that sounded like a blender with a fork stuck in it filled the air, accompanied by a swirl of lights that would make even the most seasoned raver dizzy. "Reminds me of my last family reunion," Terk muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Just with less alcohol and more existential dread, Juno, ever the pragmatist, was already tapping away at her wrist console, fingers flying faster than a politician backtracking on a promise. "They've got their psychic shields up," she noted, frowning at the readouts. "We need to punch through if we want this to work." Terk chuckled, the sound hollow. "Good thing we've got a bunch of emotional wrecks on our side. If there's one thing we're good at, it's feeling too much." The Zyxarian leader, looking like a cosmic peacock on a power trip, turned his attention to the humans, disdain practically dripping from his elongated face. "You humans are but mere insects trying to topple giants," he declared, as if rehearsing for a role in a bad space opera. Terk grinned, a feral edge to it. "Funny you say that. I've always been a fan of giant killing. Makes for a good story." With a nod from Juno, the human resistance unleashed their secret weapon: empathy. It wasn't the kind you found on greeting cards or in the eyes of overly sentimental grandparents. This was raw, weaponized emotion, honed to a razor's edge by anger, fear, and a good old-fashioned stubbornness. The psychic energy hit the Zyxarians like a tidal wave. The alien leader staggered, his arrogance evaporating quicker than beer at a frat party. Confusion and disbelief twisted his features as human emotions, messy, chaotic, and all too real, crashed through their defenses. Counselor Rin, standing with a dignity that belied his rusty-hinged voice, shouted above the tumult. "Now, we need to destabilize their technology while they're off balance." Merk, clutching his precious report as if it could ward off doom, nodded vigorously. "I've always said our unpredictability would be our saving grace," he mumbled, voice barely audible over the chaos. Terk's wristpad lit up with a series of alerts, the device as jittery as he felt. "Let's see if we can't bring down that gate," he said, glancing at Juno. "You up for a little tech wizardry?" "Please," Juno replied with a smirk. I was hacking my parents' security systems before I learned to tie my shoes. While the Zyxarians flailed amidst the storm of emotions, Juno worked her magic. Her fingers danced over the console, a symphony of chaos as she picked apart the alien tech with the finesse of a concert pianist dissecting a particularly tricky sonata. As she worked, Terk kept his eyes on the prize, the Singularity Gate. It loomed like an ominous prophecy, a cosmic guillotine ready to slice apart their world if they failed. A piece of dangerously advanced tech the Zyxarians had claimed to be a divine intervention, when it was really just a bomb with more steps. "They've underestimated us," Juno said, her voice steady despite the pandemonium. "They thought their tech made them untouchable," Terk snorted, typical alien arrogance. "Guess they didn't count on us being the universe's biggest pain in the ass." With a final, decisive tap, Juno found a chink in their defenses. The Singularity Gate flickered, its once imposing presence now shimmering like a mirage on the brink of disappearing. A cheer erupted from the human ranks, fierce and jubilant. They pressed the advantage, empathy still pulsing through them like a second heartbeat, disrupting the Zyxarian psychic network with every step. "Watch out," Juno warned, barely looking up from her wrist console. "They're regrouping." "Seems they don't like being outplayed by a bunch of emotional apes." Terk glanced at the Zyxarians, who were indeed starting to recover, anger and frustration clear in their strange alien features. "Let them come," he said, a reckless grin spreading across his face. "We'll show them what it means to have a bad day." The battle raged on, a maelstrom of energy and emotions. The humans, fueled by desperation and a stubborn desire to see tomorrow, fought with a tenacity that surprised even themselves. Rin, like a worn-out but still determined general, barked orders that carried over the din. "Keep pushing, they are on the back foot." Merk, who seemed to have gone through an entire spectrum of emotions in a single battle, shook his head in wonder. "I can't believe this is actually working," he muttered, eyes wide. "Believe it," Terk replied, dodging a wild swing from a Zyxarian. "We might be a bunch of misfits, but we're a bunch of misfits with a plan." With the Singularity Gate destabilizing under Juno's relentless assault, the Zyxarians were forced to divert their attention. Their once imposing figures now seemed less like gods and more like petulant children who'd had their toys taken away. Terk seized the moment, rallying his troops with a grin that would make a shark proud. "We've got them on the ropes, people. Let's finish this and get back to our miserable lives." Juno, managing to look both focused and exasperated, added, "And maybe, just maybe, we'll live to see another day where we don't have to worry about being turned into cosmic goo." As the resistance bore down on the Zyxarian lines, the aliens began to falter. The humans' unpredictable tactics and sheer emotional overload proved too much for their precision-tuned minds. Finally, with a resounding crash that echoed through the landscape, the Singularity Gate collapsed in on itself, a dying star imploding into oblivion. The Zyxarians, deprived of their ultimate weapon, were left in disarray. The humans pressed their advantage, driving the aliens back with a combination of raw emotion and sheer bloody-mindedness. One by one, the Zyxarian ships began to retreat, their previously invincible armada now reduced to a disorganized jumble fleeing across the skies. As the last of the alien ships disappeared into the ether, a stunned silence fell over the battlefield. Humanity, against all odds, had triumphed. Terk, still riding the high of victory, let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Well," he said, turning to Juno with a grin that was easier than expected. Juno rolled her eyes, but there was a warmth to her gaze. "Speak for yourself. I think I've developed a few new gray hairs." Rin, looking older and wearier than ever, approached the pair with a nod of acknowledgement. "A victory well earned," he said, his rusty voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Merk, clutching his report like a sacred text, simply shook his head in disbelief. "I'll never understand how we managed to pull that off." Terk clapped him on the back. "Because we're humans, Merk, and humans never do what's expected." As the dust settled, the survivors began to regroup, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. Kelthora, a blasted wasteland moments before, now felt like a place where hope might actually take root. Juno, ever the realist, glanced up at the skies. "Think they'll be back?" Terk shrugged, a wry smile on his lips. "Probably, but we'll be ready." Rin, with the wisdom of countless battles etched into his features, nodded. "And next time we'll be the ones with the element of surprise." Terk couldn't help but laugh, a sound tinged with both humor and disbelief. "I never thought I'd say this, but let's hope for a boring day tomorrow." Juno smirked, her sarcasm as sharp as ever. "Boring? In this universe, you must be dreaming." As the remnants of the resistance began to pick up the pieces, Terk allowed himself a moment of introspection. They'd faced impossible odds and come out the other side, a testament to humanity's enduring spirit, or maybe just its stubborn refusal to bow to fate. Whatever the case, they'd earned their place in the stars, and for once, Terk felt a flicker of pride in their ragged, irreverent humanity. Because when it came down to it, they'd proven the one thing the universe should never forget: never underestimate a human having a really bad day. Guess we should start planning how to fix this mess, Juno said, gesturing to the wreckage surrounding them. Terk nodded, a lopsided grin on his face. Or at least where to start drinking. Together, they turned back to the ruins they'd fought to save, knowing that tomorrow was just another chapter in their endless, chaotic saga. And for once, Terk was okay with that, because if there was one thing he'd learned, it was that when the universe tried to screw you over, you could always count on humans to screw it right back. The dust finally started to settle over the wasteland that was Kelthora. The air still tasted like burnt metal, and the horizon was littered with the carcasses of downed Zyxarian ships, but the humans were alive, which was more than anyone expected this morning. The victory was a fragile thing, like Terk's patience in a council meeting, but it was theirs. Terk surveyed the scene, a grim satisfaction tugging at his lips. "You know," he said, addressing the chaos around him, "I was expecting more explosions. This feels a bit anticlimactic for my taste." Nearby, Juno was already poking at her wrist console, her face a mask of concentration. "You're just upset because you didn't get to blow something up yourself," she replied, not looking up. "You're like a kid at Christmas who found out Santa's real but didn't bring any fireworks." Terk chuckled, despite himself. "Hey, I was promised cosmic fireworks and galactic spectacle. This is barely a neighborhood bonfire." Counselor Rin shuffled over, his usual air of bureaucratic ennui replaced with something akin to relief. "A victory nonetheless," he croaked, voice like two rusty gears trying to grind out an opera. "We've sent the peacocks packing, and last I checked, that's reason enough to celebrate." "Celebrate," Merrick echoed, his voice wobbling as he cradled his report like a newborn. "More like figure out what the hell happened and hope it doesn't again." "Optimism, Merrick," Terk teased, clapping the counselor on the back with a force that made Merrick stumble forward. "It's a new thing we humans are trying. Might even put it on the next interstellar brochure." Juno rolled her eyes, a gesture she seemed to have perfected over the course of the day. "I'm sure the Zyxarians can't wait for that." "Visit Earth, we have unpredictability and anger issues." Terk grinned. "Throw in a coupon for a free therapy session and it's a done deal." The remaining humans began the slow process of regrouping, picking through the battlefield for survivors and salvageable tech. The air was filled with a strange mix of exhaustion and the relentless drive to keep moving, the dual engines that had propelled humanity so far. "Think they'll try again?" Terk asked, more out of a need to fill the silence than any real concern. Rin shook his head, the lines etched deeper into his face by the day's events. "They might, but not for a while. You've given them something to chew on." "Yeah," Juno piped up, like a mouthful of broken teeth. Their banter was interrupted by a cheer that rose up from the human ranks like a wave, gaining strength as it rolled across the battlefield. A moment of unity, a brief spark in the darkness that reminded everyone why they were here, why they fought. Merrick, still clutching his report, looked like he was about to faint. "If we survive this, I'm retiring," he muttered. "I hear asteroid mining is less stressful." Terk laughed, a harsh sound that held more than a touch of mania. "Tell me about it. At least rocks don't talk back, or try to convert you into their collective," Juno added, "though I suppose there's a certain appeal to being part of a hive mind." "No meetings, no taxes, just pure, uninterrupted existential dread. Sounds like my last job," Terk said with a crooked grin. The conversation petered out as they turned their attention to the task at hand, rebuilding. The Zyxarians might have been pushed back, but they'd left a hell of a mess behind. "First things first," Juno said, eyeing the wreckage. "We need to figure out what tech we can salvage." "Great," Terk replied, rubbing his hands together. "Back to playing scavenger in the world's most morbid treasure hunt. Better than letting it rust," Rin pointed out, though the effort it took to sound optimistic was more than evident. "Yeah, well, I don't trust anything that came off those ships," Terk said, eyeing a particularly nasty piece of alien tech. "Last thing we need is for some Zyxarian toaster to sprout legs and start a coup," Juno snorted. "Given how today's gone, I wouldn't be surprised if my wrist console starts launching mini revolts." Rin, ever the voice of weary authority, cleared his throat. "Let's focus on the essentials: repairs, regrouping, and supplies. And maybe a bath," Merrick suggested, looking at his grime-covered hands with distaste. "I feel like I'm carrying half of Kelthora on me." "You can lead by example," Terk said, gesturing grandly toward a muddy puddle that had somehow survived the carnage. "Just jump right in, counselor." Merrick grimaced but didn't protest further. After all, a bit of dirt was a small price to pay for survival. As the day stretched into night, the humans worked tirelessly. They were a ragtag bunch, but they moved with a purpose that belied their appearance. The task before them was enormous, but like a stubborn toddler with a tower of blocks, they refused to give up. You'd think they'd be more demoralized, Terk mused, watching the flurry of activity around them. Humans are weird like that, Juno replied, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. We thrive on chaos, remember, right? It's like our national pastime. Rin joined them, his presence a comforting reminder of the old guard. Order from chaos, that's always been the way of things. Sounds like a motto, Terk said. A grim one, Juno added, but fitting. As the hours slipped by, the initial adrenaline rush waned and fatigue set in. But even exhaustion couldn't dampen the sense of accomplishment that hummed through the air. They'd done it. They'd survived. Hey, Juno, Terk said, breaking the silence that had settled over them. You ever think about what comes next? A good night's sleep, preferably in a real bed, she replied, her voice heavy with longing. He chuckled. Yeah, well, after that, she considered the question, her gaze wandering to the horizon, where a faint glimmer of stars peeked through the dust-laden sky. I don't know, she admitted, but I think that's the beauty of it. Rin, ever the philosopher, nodded approvingly. The future is unwritten, and that is its greatest promise. Merrick, who'd managed to find a moment of peace in the chaos, chimed in. I think I'll start small. Maybe a garden, something to remind us what we're fighting for. Terk grinned, clapping him on the back again. Look at you, Merrick, an optimist in disguise. He shrugged, a hint of a smile on his face. After today, I think we've earned a little optimism. The rebuilding continued, a symphony of clanging metal and shouted orders. Even in the face of destruction, there was life, and where there was life, there was hope. Think we'll ever get used to this? Juno asked, leaning against a battered piece of machinery. Terk considered the question, a slow smile spreading across his face. Probably not, but that's okay, keeps things interesting. Interesting, Juno repeated, shaking her head. Now there's a word I'd happily live without. The night wore on, bringing with it a semblance of peace. The battle was over, the immediate threat gone, and though the future remained uncertain, for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like an impending doom. Terk looked out over the remnants of the battlefield, his heart swelling with a strange, unexpected pride. They'd done it. They'd faced the worst and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. You know, he said, turning to Juno and Rin, I think we might just make it after all. Juno smirked, her usual sarcasm tempered by the day's events. Don't go getting all sentimental on me now. Wouldn't dream of it, Terk replied, though the warmth in his eyes betrayed him. Rin, standing resolute despite the weariness etched into his features, placed a hand on Terk's shoulder. The universe is vast and uncaring, but today we proved that we're not just flotsam adrift in the void. A small cheer rose up from the workers nearby, the sound carrying through the night. It was a raw and ragged thing, but it was real, and it was theirs. The Zyxarians are gonna think twice before messing with us again, Juno said, a fierce light in her eyes. Let's hope they were taking notes, Terk replied. Class was in session and we weren't pulling punches. As the first hints of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a soft glow over the battered landscape, the humans paused to take in the sight. It was a new day, one that held promise and peril in equal measure, but they were ready. Well, Terk said, clapping his hands together. Looks like we've got work to do. Juno groaned, but there was no real complaint in it. Back to being the universe's biggest pain in the ass. Exactly, he replied with a grin. Wouldn't have it any other way. And so they set to work, rebuilding their shattered world with determination and a healthy dose of gallows humor. They were humans, after all, resilient and irreverent, standing defiantly against the universe's attempts to beat them down. As they labored under the rising sun, a sense of camaraderie bloomed among them, a shared understanding that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Because if there was one thing they'd all learned, it was that humans might be flawed, but they were never without hope.